I showed him exactly what he wanted to watch, and you know what? A part of me, maybe a big part, wanted to be seen. Really seen. You can judge me. It's okay. Most people would. Hell, I judged me too. At first. But let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were living your life on mute? Like the world kept turning, but somehow you stopped feeling anything along the way? That's where I was. Stuck. In a routine that looked perfect on the outside. A husband. A house. A daughter. Even a damn herb garden. But I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize myself. Just this tired woman who smiled on cue and felt nothing behind her eyes. Then he showed up. Liam. 26. Way too young for me. My neighbor's son. Staying with his dad for the summer. He was younger. Off limits. And he watched me, not like a boy with a crush, but like a man who saw a woman who hadn't been looked at in a long time. Noticed. Studied. Undressed emotionally. And let me tell you, that kind of gaze. It burns. It doesn't hit your skin, it hits your soul. He didn't look at me like I was a wife. Or a mother. Or someone he was supposed to be polite to. He looked at me like I was a woman. And I had forgotten what that even felt like. This isn't a story about lust. If that's what you're here for, you'll be disappointed. This is a story about loneliness. About the kind of emptiness that crawls into your chest while you're making dinner and washing dishes and folding laundry and pretending everything's fine. It's about finding something you forgot you needed, like being touched without being asked for anything, being listened to without being fixed. It's about how it all started with a glance, a moment, and how that moment turned into a crack. And through that crack, the truth started pouring in, and then the damage, and then the desire. You ever had someone look at you like they already knew your secrets, but still wanted to know more? That was Liam. And this is my cheating confession. My forbidden love story. My emotional affair I never saw coming. But let's start at the beginning. Because the day he stepped into my backyard with his rolled-up sleeves, sun in his hair, and that quiet kind of curiosity in his eyes, was the day everything began to unravel. And I'm going to tell you every damn piece of it, because someone out there needs to know they're not alone. I wasn't expecting anyone that day. It was one of those hot, still afternoons where everything feels stuck in slow motion. The kind of heat that makes time feel heavy. I was in the garden, pruning the roses that my husband, Eric, used to compliment but hadn't mentioned in years. I had my gloves on, dirt under my nails, sweat along my brow, and the planter I was trying to move was just too damn heavy. I muttered something under my breath, something halfway between frustration and surrender, and that's when I heard a voice behind me. "Let me get that for you." I turned. And there he was. Liam. Shirt slightly damp from the sun, hair a little messy in that effortless way. Eyes soft, warm, brown, maybe hazel, I couldn't tell in the light, but they held a kind of calm I hadn't seen in a long time. Not the sharp gaze of someone trying to impress, but the steady curiosity of someone who really looked. I don't even remember what I said at first. Probably something awkward. I wasn't used to people helping me without being asked. Eric didn't do that anymore. He was always too busy, always looking at a screen, always somewhere else. But Liam, he just reached down and lifted the planter like it was nothing. No theatrics. No smugness. Just quiet strength. And then he smiled. And God help me, I smiled back. Not the polite smile I gave the neighbors or the tired one I wore at family functions. This was different. This one felt real. He made me laugh, too. Some joke about how he wasn't much of a gardener, but he was good at heavy lifting emotionally and otherwise. It was the kind of joke that sneaks under your skin, the kind that surprises you because it's been so long since someone made you feel light. That moment stayed with me. A week later, I saw him again. I was out by the roses again, because honestly, I didn't have much else to do that day. The house was spotless, my client calls were done, and Eric had texted that he'd be late again. I was kneeling down, clipping away dead stems, when I felt someone watching me. Not in a creepy way. just watching. I looked up. Liam, leaning against the fence, a bottle of water in his hand. He gave a small wave. I smiled back. That was it. Just a wave. A smile. Innocent. But it lingered. There was something in the way he looked at me. Not like a boy with a crush. Not like a neighbor being polite. It was like he saw through me. Saw something I didn't even realize I was showing. I didn't know much about him then. Just that he was staying with his dad for the summer, house sitting or something like that. Rumor was he'd just gone through a breakup. A messy one. But what struck me wasn't his past. It was how present he was. Liam didn't talk much, but when he did, he chose his words carefully. And when he listened with his whole body. Like nothing else existed. Like he wasn't thinking about what to say next. And that was dangerous. Because I'd been invisible for a long time. 12 years married. To a man who loved me, sure. But who didn't see me anymore. Eric and I had once shared everything. But now? Our conversations were bullet points. Logistics. Groceries. Bills. The kids' schedule. And every time I tried to say something deeper, something real, it was like throwing stones into a void. No echo. No reaction. Just silence. I started wondering if maybe I wasn't saying anything that mattered. Maybe I wasn't interesting anymore. Maybe I was just fading. But then Liam looked at me like I was made of light. Like I was a whole storm he wanted to stand in. He never flirted. Not at first. Not with words. But it was in the pauses. The way he'd linger when saying goodbye. The way his eyes would trace the outline of my face like it was something worth remembering. And I hated how much I noticed. I hated how I found myself looking out the window to see if he was outside. How I lingered an extra minute watering the plants just in case he walked by. It was nothing. But it was something. The kind of something you feel in your chest before you even admit it to yourself. One afternoon, I walked out with a glass of lemonade in each hand. I told myself it was just a neighborly thing to do. I offered him one. He smiled, took it, and sat on the edge of my porch without saying a word. We sat there. Quiet. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. And then he asked me, so simply, "Do you like your life?" Not, "How was your day?" Not, "What do you do?" Just, "Do you like your life?" No one had ever asked me that. Not even Eric. I didn't know what to say. I think I laughed, but it sounded hollow in my throat. I said something like, "It's a good life." But it wasn't a yes. Liam just nodded. Like he understood. Like he heard what I wasn't saying. That was the first time I realized this wasn't just boredom. Or curiosity. This was something more dangerous. This was the first crack. And once you see the crack, you can't unsee it. It started with the little things. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Liam would just be there. Like he knew the exact moment to show up. I'd be carrying groceries in, and suddenly he'd appear beside me, no warning. Just that soft smile and those words, "Need a hand." And then there was coffee. One morning, I was out front, barefoot, hair tied up, still in my robe, sipping coffee on the porch swing. He was walking his dog, and I thought he'd just wave like usual. But instead, he crossed the street. He didn't say much. Just pointed at my mug and said, "That smells better than what I've got." So I offered him a cup. Just being polite, I told myself. We talked for a few minutes that morning. About coffee beans and sleep schedules and the weather. But somehow, we always ended up somewhere deeper. By the third or fourth time we had coffee together, we were talking about books, music, childhood memories, heartbreak. That morning, he asked me, "When's the last time someone made you feel special?" And I laughed, this awkward, uncomfortable laugh, and I said, "What kind of question is that?" But the truth was, I couldn't answer. Because I didn't remember. Eric used to. In the beginning. I'd come home from meetings to find dinner ready, candles lit. He used to leave notes in my suitcase when I traveled for work. Now? Now I was lucky to get a text saying, "Don't forget milk." I shouldn't have let that question sit with me. But it did. It followed me around the house, into the shower, into bed, into the way I looked at myself in the mirror. I told myself Liam was just being nice, that I was imagining the energy between us. But then the moments started stacking up. One evening, I lent him a novel I had just finished. Something about grief and rediscovery, poetic, sad, quiet. He held it like it meant something, like books weren't just paper but doors. And when he returned it a few days later, he'd underlined a passage. Just one line. Sometimes, the loneliest people are the ones who smile the most. He didn't say anything about it, just handed the book back with that same soft gaze. And I felt exposed, but seen. Then there was the night the porch light went out. I mentioned it offhand, just one of those add it to the list kind of things. And the next day, there he was, toolbox in hand, up on a ladder replacing the bulb. No asking, no explanation, just doing. But the moment that truly shifted things was during the thunderstorm. It was late afternoon. The sky turned the color of bruises and rain started hammering the patio roof like 1,000 tiny fists. I was sitting under the cover, legs tucked under me, a blanket across my lap, just watching the storm. And then he showed up. No umbrella. Just him, damp hair, hoodie stuck to his shoulders, and that look again. He asked if he could sit for a minute. I nodded. We sat in silence, just listening. And then, I don't even know why, I told him about my mom. How she used to sit just like this when it stormed. How we used to talk for hours when I was a teenager. How she died too young. How I never really healed from it. How Eric didn't know how to hold me back then. Still doesn't. I told him I hated crying in front of people. And he said, then don't cry in front of me. Just be. He didn't touch me. Didn't interrupt. Just listened. Really listened. And it was in that silence that I realized how long it had been since someone just let me be. Without fixing. Without judging. Without rushing me through my own pain. The storm passed. But something stayed between us. A different kind of charge. It wasn't sexual, not yet. But it was undeniable. He noticed everything. The tiny chip in my nail polish. The new freckle near my collarbone. How tired my eyes look some mornings, and he'd say, "Did you sleep okay?" Not as a greeting, but as a real question. Once, I dropped a book. We both reached down to pick it up, and our fingers touched. Just barely. But I froze. And so did he. We didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat in that contact for one breath too long. Then pulled away. Politely. Casually. Like it didn't mean anything. But it did. It meant everything. Because I felt it. In the pit of my stomach. In the flush rising to my cheeks. In the way my heart raced like I'd done something wrong. But also, somehow, something right. And every time he looked at me, it was like I was someone worth looking at again. Not a wife. Not a mother. Not a woman holding everything together while falling apart inside. Just Ava. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Because I started wanting it. That feeling. That mirror. That aliveness. And it terrified me. Because I knew exactly what I was playing with. And I knew how easily fire spreads. But I didn't stop. I didn't want to. Not yet. There's a moment. A very specific one. When you know, you've gone too far to pretend anymore. You haven't kissed. You haven't touched. But emotionally, you've already crossed the line. That moment for me came on a Tuesday. It had rained earlier that day, summer rain. The kind that steams off the pavement before the sun even finishes hiding. I had just gotten home from a client meeting, kicked off my heels at the door, hair still tied up, makeup faded. I was tired, the kind of tired that sits in your bones, not just your body. I stepped out back to water the plants. That's when I heard his voice. Need help? I turned. There he was, standing just on the other side of the fence, leaning casually like he had all the time in the world. I smiled without meaning to. "It's just a watering can, Liam." He shrugged. Maybe I just wanted an excuse. He climbed over. No hesitation. No invitation, really. Just this knowing, like we both understood that something had shifted. I offered him a drink. Lemon water. Something safe. He followed me into the kitchen. The air inside was thick, not hot, but heavy. He sat at the kitchen island while I poured. And for a second, I felt like I was in a scene I hadn't agreed to be part of. Like I was watching myself from above. Married woman. Younger man. Quiet house. No witnesses. He was watching me, not with hunger, not with boldness, but with attention. The kind that starts peeling back your layers before you're even aware of it. I handed him the glass, and our fingers brushed again. This time, I didn't move away. Neither did he. He said it softly. "You don't have to pretend anymore." I froze. I wanted to ask what he meant, play dumb, laugh it off. But I couldn't, because I knew exactly what he meant. And the truth is, I was tired of pretending. I leaned back against the counter, heart pounding, palms flat behind me. He didn't come closer. He just held my gaze. "Do you know," he said, "that when you laugh, you touch your collarbone without realizing it? Or that you hum when you're thinking?" I shook my head slowly, trying not to let the tears sting. He continued, "And the way you look away when someone gets too close, like you're scared they'll see something you've hidden." That did it. The dam cracked. Not from lust. Not from thrill. From being seen. From someone naming all the things I didn't think anyone noticed anymore. I turned my face, tried to hide it, but he said, "Ava, look at me." And when I did, everything fell apart and fell together in one breath. We didn't kiss. But I wanted to, desperately. Instead, I stepped back. "I can't," I whispered. "I'm married." He nodded. "I know." Then he looked down, took a long sip of his drink, and said, "But you're also human." I don't know how long we stood there. Maybe a minute. Maybe longer. He left quietly. No drama. No pressure. Just that lingering silence. That invisible thread pulled so tight, I thought it would snap. But it didn't. It stayed. Even as the door shut behind him. Even as I stood alone in my quiet kitchen, shaking. That night, I lay beside Eric in bed, facing the other direction. He was already asleep. Snoring lightly. Unaware. And I stared at the ceiling, heart wide open, chest aching. Not because I had betrayed him. Not yet. But because I knew I would. Because something in me had already left. And once you let someone see you the way Liam saw me, you don't just walk away unchanged. You carry that gaze with you. Into your dreams. Into your mornings. Into every quiet moment when your phone doesn't ring and your husband doesn't look up from his laptop. That was the moment. Right there in the kitchen. No kiss. No touch. Just words. Just eyes. Just truth. But that was the beginning of the end. Because from that point on, there was no pretending anymore. It started with the texts. Short. Harmless. At least, that's what I told myself. "Thanks for the lemon water. You looked peaceful in the garden today. Do you ever sleep, Ava?" I'd smile at my phone in the dark, screen lighting up my face while Eric slept beside me, turned to the wall. And sometimes, I'd wait to respond. Just to feel the thrill of making him wait. Then came the late-night walks. We told ourselves it was just exercise. We wore sneakers, brought water bottles, talked about everything except the thing growing between us. We laughed. We teased. We walked slower on the way back. One night, his hand brushed mine. And instead of moving away, I let mine linger. It was subtle, but my skin remembered. His warmth stayed in my palm long after we said goodnight. The first kiss didn't come with fireworks. No dramatic music. No cinematic rainstorm. It happened in the kitchen. I'd left a scarf out in the garden, maybe on purpose, maybe not. He dropped it off. I thanked him. Then, without planning to, I said, Stay for a minute? He hesitated, but only for a breath. We stood across from each other. No rush. No script. He looked at me with that same quiet question I'd felt brewing for weeks. And I gave the answer in silence. He stepped closer. I didn't back away. His hand grazed my cheek, and I closed my eyes. The kiss was slow, hesitant at first. Then it deepened, like a truth too long buried. And when I pulled back, I didn't apologize. I didn't run. I just whispered. I should have stopped. But I didn't want to. Because in that moment, I remembered who I used to be. Before the meetings. Before the laundry. Before the 12 years of half conversations and microwave dinners. Before I became invisible. After that, we couldn't go back. At work, I was inspired again. Colors spoke to me. Textures. Spaces. Clients complimented my energy. They didn't know I was designing kitchens by day and lying awake at night, listening to Liam's voice notes at 2 a.m. He never said anything crude. He didn't have to. Sometimes he'd just say, I thought about the way you touched your necklace today when you were nervous. Or, you laughed in that meeting, but your eyes looked tired. I'd replay those messages over and over. Because in every word, he was telling me, I see you. And Eric. Eric was still Eric. Kind. Predictable. Distracted. He'd kiss my forehead, tell me I looked nice, and then bury himself in spreadsheets. I'd hide my smile when he walked in, not because I meant to hurt him, but because it was impossible not to glow from being wanted. The guilt was there. Always. Like a whisper in the mirror. Like a question behind every compliment. But it wasn't enough to stop me. Because every time Liam looked at me, I felt like home. Not a house. Not a routine. Not a title. But that rare, dangerous kind of home where you're fully known. Exposed. Desired. We never flaunted it. We weren't reckless. He'd sit with me at the park, far from the neighborhood. We'd browse used bookstores and leave separately. Sometimes he'd linger near my garden, pretending to help with the soil, just to feel my presence. And then there were the quiet moments, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with bodies. Like the time he watched me undress, not physically, but emotionally. I told him about the miscarriage I'd never spoken about. The one that happened 2 years into my marriage. Eric mourned in silence. Moved on in silence. But Liam, he cried, not for himself, for me. And after that, we were bonded in a way that felt irreversible. It was intoxicating. And suffocating. Because every time I saw him, I lit up. And every time I didn't, the guilt clawed at me. I'd tell myself to stop. To end it. I'd stare at my wedding ring and whisper, this isn't me. But then he'd send a single text. You okay? And just like that, I'd fall again. Not because I was weak, but because, for the first time in years, I felt alive. The truth about forbidden love is, it never stays hidden. At first, I thought we were careful. Thought I was careful. But Eric, he wasn't blind. Just busy. Distracted. And maybe he was choosing not to see what had already slipped through the cracks. But one night, I came home from a walk with Liam, cheeks flushed, heart still racing, perfume clinging faintly to my scarf. And Eric looked up from the couch and asked, Are you seeing someone? Just like that. No warning. No rage. Just quiet. I froze. Every lie I had rehearsed disappeared. I laughed it off. Told him he was being paranoid. Said, seriously? Me? I barely leave the house. He didn't argue. Just nodded. And stared at the coffee table like it held the answer to something neither of us wanted to ask out loud. But that wasn't the end. A week later, it was my daughter. She was home from college early, unannounced. I didn't hear her car pull in. I was in the kitchen. Liam had just dropped off a box of antique knobs I mentioned I liked from a shop in town. We lingered too long at the door. I didn't even notice her standing in the hallway until she cleared her throat. Liam looked like he'd been caught stealing light. I said he was just a neighbor helping with a project. She didn't argue, didn't nod. She just stared at me, this long, searching stare, and said okay. But it wasn't okay. I could feel it. She knew something wasn't right. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls felt closer, the silence louder. I stared at the ceiling and counted regrets like stars. I started avoiding Liam. Didn't reply to his texts right away. Stopped our morning walks. Said I was busy when he offered to bring lunch. I was trying to create space, to think, to breathe, to regain control. But space is dangerous when hearts are involved. He noticed. Of course he did. One night, he showed up unannounced again. Only this time, he didn't bring flowers or books or found objects he claimed reminded him of me. He brought frustration. Hurt. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "You said you wanted to feel alive again. So why are you hiding?" I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know how. I was stuck between the woman I promised to be and the one he made me remember. I whispered, "I don't know how to do this anymore." And he said, "I do. Run away with me." I laughed. I think I laughed because it was the first time I heard it out loud, the fantasy we never dared say. The escape. The selfish dream. But reality was heavier than that. "I have a husband," I said. "I have a daughter. A life." "You have a cage," he whispered, and walked away. After that, everything changed. He didn't come around anymore. Didn't linger by the fence. Didn't text. And that silence. It was louder than his presence ever was. Eric started asking more questions. Where I was. Why I was quiet. If something was wrong. I gave him pieces of myself, not the truth, just enough to soothe. And every time Liam's name came to my lips, I swallowed it like poison. My heart split open every time I thought of his eyes. Of how he listened. Of how he made me feel like I mattered. But what do you do when the thing that makes you feel alive is the same thing that's killing everything you built? I wanted him. And I wanted to be a good wife. And I wanted to be a good mother. But those versions of me couldn't live in the same body anymore. And pretending they could was tearing me apart. I stopped answering Liam's calls. I deleted the voice notes. I stopped going to the places we used to share. And each time, it felt like losing a limb I could still feel. Because even in his absence, he was everywhere. In the music I played low while cooking. In the scent of jasmine from the candle he once said reminded him of my skin. In the ache between the hours of 2 and 3 a.m. That was when I'd sit on the edge of my bed and whisper, "What am I doing?" But no one ever answered. Only the clock, ticking, relentless, honest. It happened on a Thursday. Isn't it strange? You always think the world ends with warning bells, thunder, a scream, maybe glass shattering. But mine ended with silence and the soft glow of a screen. I had left my phone on the dresser, unlocked, careless. Maybe deep down I wanted it to be found. Eric was standing in the hallway when I walked in, his face unreadable. Not rage, not pain, just this dead calm that made my knees buckle. He didn't say a word, didn't shout or ask why. He just held out my phone, the screen open, one of the voice notes I sent to Liam at 2 a.m. My voice trembling, whispering, "I miss you. I can't sleep without thinking of your hands." And then, he placed it gently on the nightstand, turned, and walked out the front door. No bags, no coat, just gone. I stood there, still, stiff, stupid. Like maybe if I didn't move, time would rewind. But it didn't. And the next morning, everything exploded. Eric came back just before sunrise. Red-eyed, empty. He didn't ask questions. He threw them like knives. "How long? Do you even love me? Was our whole life a lie?" I tried to speak. But what do you say when you've taken something sacred and shattered it on purpose? I cried. I begged. I said I was confused. But even I didn't believe that. He said, "You could have just told me you were lonely." And I almost laughed. Because I had. 1,000 times. In different ways. In the dinners I cooked he didn't eat. In the dresses I wore he never noticed. In the nights I turned to face him and he was already asleep. But I didn't say that. I just sat there on the edge of the bed. Eyes swollen. Heart hollow. Whispering, "I'm sorry." Like it could undo the damage. Later that day, Liam came by. He must have heard something happened. He didn't say much. Just looked at me. And reached out to hold my hand. But I pulled back. I was numb. Detached. Somewhere between grief and guilt. He asked, "Are you okay?" And I said no. Then he stepped closer and said, "We can leave. Start over. I'll take care of you." And I wanted to believe that. I did. But love isn't always the rescue boat. Sometimes, it's the storm. I shook my head. Tears already falling. He asked, "Was any of it real?" And I said, "All of it. Every word. Every moment." Then I looked him in the eyes that had once made me feel seen, and said, "But love isn't always enough." He didn't cry. Didn't argue. He just stood there. One last look. One final silence. Then he left. No slammed doors. No dramatic exits. Just an ending. Afterward, I walked into the kitchen. Sat down at the table. Poured myself a glass of water with shaking hands. And stared at the floor. For what felt like hours. Because when the fire dies down, you're left with the ashes. And you have to choose. Sweep them away. Or sit in them and let them swallow you. I didn't know what I was going to do. I only knew one thing for certain. I had broken something that I could never fix. There's a silence that settles in after the storm. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that echoes. Loud. Unforgiving. A silence that forces you to sit with yourself. Eric moved out a week later. No dramatic goodbyes. Just boxes. Keys left on the counter. And a letter I couldn't bring myself to open until weeks after. My daughter. She wouldn't even look at me. She walked past me in the hall like I was air. Not cold. Not cruel. Just distant. Like I had become something small and disappointing. And Liam? Gone. No more texts. No more voice notes. No more glances from across the fence. Just silence. I tried to stay busy at first. Organized drawers that didn't need organizing. Scrubbed floors that were already clean. Cleaned out my closet and threw away clothes that still smelled like memory. But nothing helped. Because you can't clean away shame. So I booked a therapy appointment. Walked into the office like a shadow of myself. Sat on that soft gray couch and spilled everything. All the ugly parts. The loneliness. The ache. The desire to feel something again, anything. My therapist didn't judge. She listened. Really listened. And I cried more in that 1 hour than I had in the last 5 years combined. I started journaling too. Just a few lines each morning. No filters. No lies. Just honesty. Some days, it was a mess of words. Other days, just silence on the page. But it helped. It was something real I could hold in my hands. I started walking through my garden again. The same one where Liam first helped me lift that heavy planter. Except now. I didn't need anyone to lift it for me. I dug my fingers into the soil. Felt the earth. Felt myself. And somewhere between the dirt and the sky, I realized something. I didn't just lose Eric. Or Liam. I lost the version of me I had been pretending to be. The wife who smiled at dinner parties. The mother who always said, "I'm fine." The woman who told herself, "This is enough," when it clearly wasn't. But maybe that wasn't a loss. Maybe it was a release. I stopped looking for rescue in someone else's eyes. Stopped hoping to be seen in someone's glance. I started asking myself, "What do you need today, Ava? What do you want?" Some days the answer was strength. Some days it was grace. But every day, it was honest. Redemption didn't come wrapped in Liam's arms or in Eric's forgiveness. It came in mornings I didn't dread, in coffee I made just for myself, in walking past a mirror and not looking away. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I was rebuilding, brick by painful brick, truth by shaky truth. And no, it wasn't romantic. It wasn't passionate or forbidden. It was quiet and slow and mine, because sometimes the most important love story is the one you write with yourself. It had been 2 years since everything, since the lies cracked open like eggshells, since the silence turned into space, since the ache became something I could finally name and let go of. I was in the city on a Saturday, looking for a travel memoir a friend had recommended. Not for any trip, just for the daydreaming. That's what I do now. Let myself dream, without needing it to escape. Just to feel alive in small ways. I turned the corner near the travel section. And there he was. Liam. Older. Taller maybe, or maybe just steadier. The same dark curls, but cropped shorter. A little stubble. Still beautiful. Still quiet. He had a guidebook in his hands, Italy, I think. Something about the Amalfi Coast. He looked up. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. His eyes found mine. And there it was. Not a jolt. Not a longing. Just a warmth. A silent acknowledgement of everything we once were. And everything we couldn't be. We didn't say a word. No, how have you been? No, I'm sorry. Just a small smile. A gentle nod. A memory held carefully between two people who once collided like fire and oxygen. Some stories don't end with a kiss. Some don't end with slammed doors or second chances. Some end in bookstores. In the quiet hum of nostalgia. In two hearts that learned their lessons the hard way. I didn't chase him. And he didn't come to me. Because we both knew. Whatever we were. Whatever we had. It was a chapter. Not the whole book. Later that night, I wrote in my journal. I saw him today. No tears. No ache. Just peace. Because the truth is, I no longer needed Liam to feel seen. I no longer needed Eric's attention to feel worthy. I had spent 2 years building a life that was mine. Not a performance. Not a rescue mission. Just mine. I traveled. I hosted small dinner parties with real laughter, not just the kind that fills silence. I forgave myself. I forgave him. And yes, I forgave them both. Not because they asked, but because I needed to. If you've been where I was, if you've ever strayed, or felt invisible, or broke your own heart while chasing something that wasn't yours to hold, just know this. You are not ruined. You are not defined by the worst thing you've done, or the loneliest moment you've survived. You're allowed to begin again, and again, and again. Because love isn't just about who holds your hand at the end of the day. Sometimes, it's about learning to hold your own. So here's my cheating confession. Not just about Liam. Not just about Eric. But about me. I showed him exactly what he wanted to watch. But I also watched myself. Falter. Break. And rise. And maybe that's the story I was meant to tell all along. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? Not just a crush or a fleeting moment, but a deep, messy, all-consuming kind of love? The kind that pulls at every part of you, even when you know it's wrong. Would you risk everything you've built, your marriage, your family, your peace, just for a chance at feeling truly alive again? Even if that happiness came with a price so high it could break you? I'm not here to judge. And maybe, neither are you. Because we all have those moments, those secret stories we keep tucked away. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have made the same choice? Would you have shown him exactly what he wanted to watch? Or would you have walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about the love we crave, the mistakes we make, and the complicated roads we walk. And if you want more stories that dive deep, stories that don't shy away from the truth, the pain, and the passion, subscribe to Cheating Confession Diary. Because here we go where others won't. We tell the stories no one else dares to tell. Thank you for listening. And remember, no one's story is perfect. But every story deserves to be heard.